G'day YouTube, it's Turbo Tristan here. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be working on turbocharging this big sooter. So this is the project that I was saying that I've never worked on before. So if you're familiar with the channel, you'll know that I don't normally work on cars like this. Behind me is a 105 series Toyota Landcruiser from roughly about 2003 or thereabouts. I think it's a 4.2 litre. If you're new to the channel, then you might want to consider subscribing. I do heaps of turbo stuff, heaps of mechanical work, some conversions, some swaps, all sorts of things. This is well out of my comfort zone because, like I mentioned, I don't normally work on diesel cars. This is the first one I've had to work on. So it's going to be a bit of a learning curve. I might say some things that aren't quite right and I might not know what I'm talking about, but that's what you get with me. I don't pretend to know everything. The basic principles of this car will be just like turbocharging any other car. There's an exhaust manifold, an exhaust, an intercooler, air goes into the motor. So that's the way I'm going to approach it. Here's the car here. Now, a bit of a diesel joke. All my family, all my brothers and friends from school are all either a diesel mechanic, work in the mines, or drive four-wheel drives. I'm the only one that doesn't. So the big sooter and the big soot and sooting up, they are all things that I hear my friends and family talk about all the time. So this is a big sooter. This is I think it's a 1HZ. It'll say it right on the front of the engine, which is a Toyota thing normally, but this is it here. Factory, naturally aspirated, straight 6-cylinder Toyota engine. Pretty sure it's a 1HZ. There was a sticker there, it's gone missing. And the reason we're adding a turbocharger is not because of racing, because this thing wouldn't pull a 6-sailor off your sister. Weak as, no guts. I've heard that when you come to a hill and you're chugging along at 100 kilometers per hour, you get to a hill, the thing will drop right back to 60, 70, 80 k's per hour. If you're going to tow anything or if you're going to go on any trips, that is just a pain in the butt, big nightmare. So the idea with this is to bolt on a turbo, run about 8 to 10 PSI, maybe a little bit more if we can tune it to suit. I won't be doing that though. What I'll be doing is fitting up the oil line. We'll just be running an oil-cooled turbo, the oil drain and a dump pipe fabricated down to the factory exhaust. And we've got all the cheapest parts we could find to go on the car. But that doesn't really mean anything because they're just an air pump at the end of the day, and I've used them many, many times. The manifold just has to flow gas into the turbo. The turbo has to spin and pump air into the engine. So both of those things will do that. We have a big front mount intercooler. Because this car was never turboed, it does have slightly higher compression than a turbo one, I'm led to believe. So if we're just going to shove boost straight into it, we do want to run a front mounted intercooler. When I first spoke with my manager, he basically wanted a turbo to go straight up, straight in, and that was it. I advised him otherwise, much to his steel trap wallet did not want to do, but we managed to source locally an intercooler kit, and it is quite comprehensive. G'day Iverson. And that intercooler kit looks great, it'll do the job. Comes with all the piping, so we're going to check out the parts that it's going to come with. Iverson, what are you doing in there? That's not yours, mister. He really loves exploring everything. So I've got all the parts just down here on the garage floor laid out to go through. Firstly, what we have is the turbo manifold. Now this one comes from Unicorn Power Systems. You can find them online. These are actually an Australian-based company, but they do manufacture their parts overseas. Now this is a 6-into-1 manifold, and I think that will do the job awesomely. They'll do the job. It just needs to flow the exhaust gas out and into the turbo. This is the front-mounted intercooler kit. Again, this comes from Unicorn Power Systems. The guys there are lovely to talk to, very helpful, and they have a lot of pride in their products. This intercooler kit is absolutely amazing. Comes with all the silicone hose, all of the alloy piping, all bead rolled, ready for brackets everywhere. Comes with a really nice cast piece, which is the intake elbow. This is really, really nice to replace the factory one. All the hose clamps and brackets are supplied inside the box, so that's awesome. Over to the turbo. Now this is a brand that you guys will be familiar with. I use these on all of my projects. This is a Max Peating Rods turbo. This is the T3 T4. Pretty much the cheapest turbo that they do. This one is very, very common. They call it a T3 T4 because it's got a T3 exhaust side and a T4 compressor side. This one has an adjustable wastegate, which is tunable, which means we can wind this rod in and out to make this spring in here softer. So what I'm going to do is wind it quite a fair way out so it's nice and soft. We'll start off with low boost and we'll start to crank it up as we go. Internally wastegated. There's a V-band flange on the back. And yeah, quite a good unit. Now this turbo from Max Peating Rods, you can actually buy at the moment for under $200. They're normally just over $200, but if you use my discount code Tristan1, we'll flash that right up here on the screen. You use that code, the link will be in the description, and you'll get 15% off that. So 15% off around about $200. Gets you a really nice affordable turbo that'll definitely do the trick. What I'm going to do now is just have a look under the bonnet, plan everything out. I'll show you what I'm planning on doing. You can let me know down in the comments if I've got it wrong or right. But I've turboed plenty of cars. This looks pretty straightforward, being it's a big car with a big engine bay, nice and easy to get to everything. Now this car has a ARB bull bar, which is going to be fun to work around. But if you take a look down here, you'll see there's actually a fair bit of room. I'm sure I'm going to have to modify or take off this bracket to fit the intercooler in there. But it looks like we should be right to get in and around all of that. So the grill will come out. We'll sit that to the side while we're fitting everything up, put it back on last. In the engine bay, we'll need to take off these extractors. Now it does have a set of aftermarket extractors on there. What we'll need to also do is remove this crossover pipe here and this pipe here going to the airbox. Don't know that I'll need to remove the airbox. There's quite a fair bit of room there. One thing that I am concerned with is this throttle bracket or throttle cable bracket. I'm hoping that this will just go straight onto the other one. But the intercooler pipe does sort of curve under here and go across here and down. So hopefully there's enough room for that and it doesn't give me too much grief. Otherwise, I don't know what I'm going to do. Probably bend and move some brackets around. What I'm going to do is stick on a time lapse, pull apart everything here, and then I'll come back once I'm back underneath the car. We'll take a look underneath. You just saw me take off the extractors, the intake pipes. So now we're going to try on for the first time the exhaust manifold. See how that fits. Well, after a little bit of finessing, I managed to get the manifold on. There was a little bracket that holds that water line on, and if you loosen it off, you've got about 5 mil of play just to push that down. Nothing got bent, nothing was, you know, manhandled. Just loosen off the bolt, push it down, tighten the bolt back up, and it stays 5 mil down, so that worked out well. I have come across another potential problem though. So here's the turbo. What I'll do is I'll clock the turbo around and spin this housing. That's all fine. It's going to be very, very tight in the back. I'll grab the camera and move it over here and show you in just a sec. So there's the turbo sitting on there. You can see that from the top. There's actually a little area down here where that can go, but it's super duper tight. I'm gonna have to wrap the hell out of it. It's basically gonna have to go out, straight down, sort of an elbow. And then once I've cleared everything sort of down in this area here, don't know if you can see my little pointer, it's gonna have to shoot straight through there. Yeah, it's gonna have to shoot, oh God, I don't even know if I can get it down there, to be honest. Hood exit, anybody? Really don't know where that's gonna go. So if that goes through there, it's gonna be so tight. Well, they make a high mount manifold for a reason. Definitely gonna have to heat wrap all of these hoses, get a bit of shielding, put that down there, but man, that is gonna be super duper tight. Man, I'm bitten off more than I can chew here because these things aren't looking like they're going to fit. That turbo sort of needs to come forward about 2 inches. Yeah, gosh, I do not know. I need to get some hardware, get some studs for this because it didn't come with any studs. Put those on, clock the turbo, spin the housing around. So once I've clocked the turbo housing and the cartridge in the center, I'm not even sure where the oil drain's gonna go. It's just not looking like it's gonna work very well at all, to be honest. Well, it looks like I've done a lot since I last stopped the camera, but I haven't really. All I've done is clock the turbo around. Now, I didn't show that because I've done it heaps on plenty of my other videos. It's where you undo the bolts on each side of the exhaust and turbine housing, and you can spin the center piece and the either outside housing around. So I've put the oil feed at the top, the drain at the bottom. I've made the turbo compressor sit like so that the boost comes out of here, and we're going to shoot somewhere down here and down underneath there, and then up through this gap, then straight into the intercooler, and then it'll go down through that gap and then up through here and up along there, straight into there. So I've also put the elbow on here, which is made specially to replace the crossover pipe. Next job I think I'm going to tackle is just down here. There is an oil sender switch, which is right next to the oil filter, and that measures the oil pressure. That's where all of the oil pressure goes, so that's the perfect place to plumb in a oil feed line. That line's going to go up here, over, and then down into there. So from just down there, up over here, and then into the top of the turbo. I've got to find all of my fittings, seeing as though I've just moved and I haven't turboed anything since I've been in my new workshop. So I'm going to go find those, take off the oil pressure switch or oil pressure sensor, whatever you want to call it. One thing that's slightly concerning that I'll point out, I'm not going to do anything about it because I don't have a gasket. With these old vehicles, I find if you tighten up these gaskets, then they are prone to cracking. So this might need replacing later on. It's just a matter of undoing all of these bolts here and replacing these seals, but they look a bit sooty, which tells me they're probably leaking a little bit of vacuum, maybe. Don't know, could be wrong. but I don't really want to touch them. They're probably brittle and probably crack and leak boost out, and we don't want to be leaking any boost. In the new elbow, the intake elbow, there's a fitting just here and a fitting just here. They're the boost references just here and here in the elbow, on the intake elbow. Now the kit does come with a fitting to run a boost gauge or a boost controller, but more than likely a boost gauge. The owner didn't supply one, so I'm going to stick that in here for now, give it back to the owner. If they want to run a boost gauge, all they need to do is undo one of these 10mm bolts and put that in, bit of silicone so it doesn't leak any air, and then run a line into the cabin for a boost gauge. So you're probably thinking, how are you going to know how much boost it's going to run? Well, I don't, unless the owner wants to cough up money for a boost gauge. We'll never know until the car goes to get tuned. But I will back off the wastegate spring down here quite a bit so it's slightly cracked, and then I think that will be fine. My experience with these, they normally come with a bit of preload and presetting and run about 6 psi. I've actually wound that down so it might even be a little bit looser than that, so we should be plenty safe. Now I've popped out the grill. This is where the intercooler is going to sit. So there's space and everything for brackets all to go in here. I have a funny feeling I'm going to have to remove this, but luckily this is pretty solid. The person who fitted the bull bar just bent that out of the road. Anyway, so, you know, probably a good idea to take that out, that whole bracket. Put the front mount intercooler into there, and then I can start to figure out how and where I'm going to run all of the pipes. It's the next day. Last night I was working till around about 12 at night, or in the morning, whichever way you want to look at it. But I do have everything mocked up in its place where it's going to go. With the intercooler, that was a bit of mucking around and fighting some hoses. It's all really high quality stuff, just in a universal kit. It's not supposed to be for a high mount turbo, so it still works, which is fantastic. So we've got all that sorted out. I've hard mounted the intercooler, just used one at the top to tie it in just here, and I've made some custom brackets on the bottom just through there like that, so that's nice and high up out of the road. We've got some airflow through here, airflow through the grill, so that'll keep all the charge temperatures cool. For the intercooler piping, just going to run straight down here along the chassis rail, and then that will come out here. I just need to sort out the bends there. I had to take that off because I was remounting the intercooler. So the next job I need to do is to get down in here and take off the oil pressure switch. So that's for running the oil pressure gauge inside the cabin. That's where I'm going to grab my feed from. A little bit tricky to see. Let me grab a light. So you can see just down there, it's filthy covered in oil and soot, but I'm going to have to take that off. It's greasy as. I've been told best way is to disconnect the starter motor. It'll give you a bit more access, and yeah, take that off, get the fitting on, ready for the oil feed line, and then that'll go up through the manifold and over to the top of the turbo there. Now the big job that I'm dreading is the exhaust pipe. Now I really want to move this heater hose. It starts off just down here and runs underneath the manifold, and really it should come out at the back of the head and go up here into the firewall, but it doesn't. It sort of runs under the manifold for some reason, comes over here towards the clutch slave, and then up and around. Don't ask me why, it's kind of in the road of everything. So I'm going to take the manifold off now and see what sort of space I'm working with. I've got to then get under the car and drop the sump, which means dropping the oil. So I'm going to get that sorted, get the sump off, drill out the sump, put in the sump fitting, put it all back on, seal it up nicely with some sealant, have a look at what I'm going to do about that heater hose, and get to work doing the oil feed line. So fun times tonight. All the dirty jobs I've been dreading, the intercooler stuff. This is just dummied in place. There's wires and stuff hanging everywhere because for some reason or other, four-wheel drive guys just like to run wires all the way through their engine bay. But when I put it all together for its final assembly, I'll tuck it all away nicely. Lots of work ahead of me tonight, so I'm going to get stuck into that, and I'll come back to you once I've got the sump off or I've got the pressure switch off, and I'll show you how to mount those fittings up. There's no point running a camera there or doing a time lapse because you won't be able to see anything anyway. So I'm going to do those few things and get back to you in a moment. Well, the sump's off. Everything is as it should be. I've drilled out the hole. I've pressure washed and cleaned the sump. So I'll show you that now. I've got the bung ready to go in. So here it is here. Excuse the mess, tools everywhere, but I've cleaned off the gasket, cleaned everything inside. This is perfectly clean in there now. Someone in the comments can tell me what this is. I don't know if it's an oil level sender or an oil temp sensor or both, but the apprentice who put the sump on and off last time, it was bent in the corners, bent in the back here. There was a bend somewhere in the middle where they tried to pry it off. This is as clean as the outside of it got. I've put two chemicals on there. One of them was just plain old degreaser in the can. The other one was like an acid alkaline sort of stuff that pretty much eats away everything except for whatever that schmutz is on there. But you can see this is pretty straight now. I'm gonna bash this a little bit more. But what I've done here is, this is a -10 fitting. I've drilled an 18mm hole. There is a O-ring rubber washer that goes on behind that. And then you just put that through and then do the nut up on the other side. But I'm gonna put a pinch of silicone on there and get that all tightened down, put it back on the car. But first I'm gonna straighten out a couple more of these bits. Now that the sump's all clean, I can lay it out flat on the concrete, give it a bash with a hammer, silicone it all up, put it all back on, and that should cure and dry in the next couple of days before we get ready to start the car up. Now I say couple of days because the downpipe for the exhaust is going to take me a while. I've got a ton of pie cuts which I'll have to use, so they're not cheap, but I don't have any other way around it. I'm going to have to sort of snake everything down past some heater hoses. From there it's just a couple of 90s, should be nice and easy, but it's the first little bit around those hoses and to get everything out of the road and clear the steering rack, clear all the suspension arms, that sort of stuff. So that's going to take a couple of days on and off. Plus I've got a full-time job, so I need to be doing that. But I'm going to get this sealed up, straightened out, slapped back in the car. Everything else looked pretty good underneath there. There was a couple of chunks of metal of some description in the gauze at the bottom of the oil pickup. I just picked those out. Should be good. Otherwise it looked really, really clean. Everything was good under there, so should be sweet. Anyway, enough chit chat. Get it back on the car. I've just about buttoned up the sump situation, but I wanted to point out that just like some of their owners, Landcruisers have little nappies that go at the back of the sump. So when the rear main seal leaks everywhere, that they can catch it and mop it up. So they have a nappy. I guess that's so when they leak oil everywhere, the Nissan owners don't see it. Just down there, right beside the oil filter, lives this guy. Now this is your oil pressure switch, or oil pressure sensor, or sender, or whatever you want to call it. There's a clip on top, it just slides off. There's a little nub there just to slip it off. Before you tear your hair out, that's a 14mm nut on the end of it, so that's what you're going to need to get down there. This is absolutely filthy. There was actually a little oil catcher pan which goes underneath the oil filter. That's actually the cleanest part of the whole engine on this side. The rest of it is caked in oil, but the oil catcher under the oil filter didn't catch any oil, so good one Toyota. This is going to be the setup here. I'm going to take this fitting, screw it into the block. From there I'm going to take the pressure sensor, screw that in to the side of the fitting like so, and then once that's in place I will fit the turbo oil feed line. So pretty straightforward, pretty simple once you know what you're looking for and what you're doing. So I'm going to put some sealant on that, fit all that up, get it nice and snugged up, and then run the oil line. The oil feed line's on. Bit hard to see now with everything connected back up, but there she is. I've just ran the feed line underneath the inlet, and then it's going to go all the way over here, and then you just simply tighten that down on there. I'm not going to do it now because I've just put that fitting on and the sealant's a little bit wet, plus I'm going to have to remove and refit the turbo a couple more times. Nothing is mounted up properly except for the sump, the oil feed line and the oil bung. I've mounted the front mount. It's all in there, tucked up behind the grill. That's just sitting in there at the moment. Got to put all the pipe work and everything on. I was just making sure that I had enough clearance behind the grill. But that's nice and solid, nice and high up. So I'm going to call it a night and get stuck into everything else tomorrow. I really want to do something with this water line here, but I don't know what to do with it. Well, it's a few days later. Thank you to everyone that messaged on YouTube and said get well soon. Wasn't feeling very well at all. Iverson's back with me, up on top of the roof. I've got the manifolds on. I've done a little bit of heat wrapping around certain places wherever I could. Mainly the reason why I did that was because the oil return line's going to be running around that area. Intercooler piping's all done. Intercooler is mounted. I did have to go down and grab a Raceworks 130-degree bend just to complete that intercooler piping there. That was a bit I was missing. Key piece to the puzzle. The downpipe's all made and heat wrapped, so all nice. V-band clamp on one end, flexi joint, just to give me a little bit of extra safety against my pretty crappy welds. Thank God for heat wrap, I can cover them all up. But seriously, if you are a TIG welder and you're local to Southeast Melbourne, hit me up. I will pay you to come and teach me some skills and show me what I'm doing wrong, because I went from doing awesome welds considering the time that I've been welding, so pretty proud of them, happy to show them off online, to pretty embarrassed. So I don't know what's wrong with me, my machine, my materials, whatever it is, but if you're local, give us a shout out. Please come and teach me some tips. I will pay you for your time. Now it's almost time to fit up the turbo for the final time. What I've got here is some 45-degree Raceworks push lock fittings with some fiberglass Raceworks sheathing. So that's going to be heat resistance to stop the rubber melting, just as a precaution. Disconnected the wastegate just for now. The top feed line is on. I've ordered the silicon bends and alloy bends to plumb back to the airbox. So now it's just a matter of putting that back on. And we are one step closer to hearing some choo-choo noises. So I'm going to get stuck into putting that on. I won't bore you with the details. Lots of me bending over and straining my back and legs and every other muscle to tighten bolts in this giant car. Iverson, wake up, son. So next time you see me, it'll all be buttoned up. It's the next day. I finished bolting everything up, buttoning it up at about midnight last night. So a bit late to do a first start video. This is what it looks like now. Everything is buttoned up, turbo's on. We've got the Raceworks line down there protecting the oil drain. We've got the oil feed. Everything's all plumbed up. The exhaust is on. Because of the size and shape of the exhaust, it is very tricky to get that in and out. So good luck to the next person that has to do any maintenance or take any of that stuff out. It took ages to just finesse that in and out of the car. Intercooler's on. So everything's all buttoned up there. We've got the feed lines done. Intercooler is mounted. That's the Unicorn Power Systems Intercooler, Unicorn Power Systems manifold. And this is how it runs, just straight down there at about the same height as the chassis rail, not lower than the recovery points. These are the road safe recovery points. And then you can see straight up there to the cooler. Over onto the other side, I had to get some extra Raceworks silicone hose and just make a mini short joiner there. Again, it doesn't hang any lower than the recovery point. So that was the aim, to make sure that it's not in any danger. With the air intake, really simple design. I've got a 3-inch piece of silicone tube that's going to come and go here. And then I've got an alloy 90, and I'm going to angle that in such a way just here, and then there'll be a 45 silicone joiner. So it shouldn't be too long, so it won't suck shut or clamp or anything like that. So that's good, and just a straight in and out. What I've actually done is clock the airbox so it's at a 90-degree angle. What I did to achieve that, to make sure it still clamps down, is I just gave these a little kink so that they're much tighter, and now it clamps down. It's nice and sealed. Just as a side note, this little bit here is like a water catcher, and then there's a little piece underneath that. Make sure you clean that out. This was full to the brim of wasps and just dead bees and stuff, which is random. But yeah, normally this sort of angles over this way, sort of pointing directly into the inlet. So I had to clock it. The way it was back here would have had to have mean a 130-degree bend back this way and then another 90 into it. Would have been all kinds of restrictive and probably too difficult for me to do anyway. So I simplified the design in only the way that I know how. But that's enough. You want to hear it, you want to see it, you want to make sure it works. So let's go ahead and fire it up. That ain't going anywhere. 482,000 kilometers. I'll try and hang this around here. Slide straight up. Idle's nice. No leaks. No dribbles. What we'll do is we'll let that warm up a bit. I'll move it outside. We'll take it for a drive and see how she drives. Well, it's been warmed up, idling for about 5 minutes. I've checked everywhere for any leaks, which is what you should always do. You first fire up after a turbo conversion or any kind of major changes. So everything's been checked. There is not a drop of oil anywhere on the car. I didn't drive it beforehand, to be honest. I just wanted to get to work and get the thing done. So I don't know what it drives like before, but I've got to say, it's very smooth. And yeah, it's not a race car, but you know, it seems to have all the power and pickup that it should. It's very torquey, and I guess that's because it's a 4.2 litre 6-cylinder and a diesel. But now with the turbo, everything's going, yeah, really nice. We're in 4th gear, 1500 RPM, 60 k's foot flat. Picking up 2,250, we're at 80 k's an hour. Shift to fifth. It just wants to go. Like, we're still at 2 grand at 80 k's an hour, but touch the throttle and it wants to shoot off. Which I guess that's what it was lacking beforehand. I'm actually trying to hold it at 80, which is the speed limit here, and it's a little bit of not a mission, but you got to watch it now, which I'd call that a success. I'll shut up and we'll see if we can hear some turbo noises. Hear that? I hope that comes through on camera, because we've got the whistles, we've got the sucks, we've got the choo-choo noises. For me, that's what it's all about. There's no point having a turbo if you can't hear it. The exhaust side of things is quiet. There's no knocks or rattles or bangs and clangs on the frame, so my fabrication skills are coming along. My welding still needs a lot of improvement, but the layout and everything was great. Shifting at 2.5. Hopefully you guys can hear that. It's a shame that I missed the courier cutoff to order the Raceworks elbow and silicon join, because it would have been joined up to the snorkel and you would have been able to hear it whistling right here, so that would have been good. 5th gear, just picks straight up. There is some really annoying wind noise here though. That's definitely some kind of a gap in the door. But now we're in 5th gear, we're at 80, we're at about 1600. Instantly just go straight to 2000, chugging along. Let's do a U-E, pack it up, and call that a success. It's nice and quiet at idle. Sounds like a Mack truck. Maybe that's just me, I'm not in these things all the time. This has a better turning circle than an Evo Lancer. Give it the berries. There's no plumes of smoke or anything coming out the back. It's nice and clean. 5th gear. Already at the speed limit. Just chug it home. The T3, T4 turbo, I was a little bit concerned if it was maybe too big, but it actually spools really nice. Everything is working just as it is. It's flowing nicely, it's not running out of puff, so that's definitely a win for the Max Peating Rods turbo. I'm wearing the shirt. A little bit of a hill, just boost away. 5th gear, going up a hill, 70 k's an hour, 1500 RPM. Does not move at all. We've actually increased our speed because of the extra load on the turbo is creating more boost. So no longer do we lose speed going up a hill, we actually start to increase speed. Happy days. And it will will go even better once we put the air intake snorkel attachment done, because it'll be getting actual cold air and not hot air straight off the turbo. We'll go back and we'll check the intercooler, make sure it's doing its job. Alright, so after 10 minutes of driving, I'm just going to pull over, use my trusty heat gun and see what the temperatures are on the intercooler. The ground's 29 degrees. 40 degrees there. 23 degrees on the cold side, so almost half the temperature of the intake air going into the engine. All thanks to that big front mount intercooler. The actual air temperature of that itself is 18 degrees, much cooler, 17, than the outside temperature if we just point at this curve, 23. So it definitely does its job. You definitely want an intercooler on your turbo diesel for sure. And before I forget, I've got no clue how much boost the car's running. No idea at all. I'm guessing it's less than 10 PSI. My thoughts are around about 6 or 7 pound. The owner of the car didn't provide a boost gauge. And you also should always run an EGT sensor or an exhaust gas temperature sensor so you can help to tune the car. Diesel cars typically don't use an oxygen sensor in the exhaust, although you do and you can. They'll run an EGT or exhaust gas temperature sensor, and that'll help them determine how rich or lean the car is, judging by the heat that's going through the exhaust. It'll also need to have the fuel mixtures adjusted via the screw on the diesel pump. Those things I'm not equipped to do, clued up enough to do, and I don't want that liability in my life, so that is for the owner to sort out themselves. I just wanted to chuck that in there because I know I'm going to get heaps of comments about that. I know, guys, I know, Turbo Tristan knows, but I've just got to do the best what I can with the budget I'm provided, with the parts I'm supplied. So that's what we got. Well, that's going to wrap up the filming and install of the turbo kit on the Landcruiser 105 series HZJ 4.2 non-turbo diesel, now with a Max Peating Rods turbo. I just want to thank Max Peating Rods for the use of the turbo T3 T4. There'll be a link below on how you can grab that and how much it's going to cost. So follow the link. Use code Tristan1 for a 15% discount. Also, there'll be a link in the description for the Unicorn Power Systems website. That'll show you how to get yourself the intercooler and the manifold. With the manifold, I'd probably make a few changes, move the turbo further forward up the engine bay and give yourself a little bit more room to thread the nuts on, or at least thread the manifold so that you can put some studs in there, because there weren't any. That would have helped a lot. But I have to say, my days are done working on four-wheel drives. My biggest pet peeve working on this car, even though it's pretty clean for its age and it wasn't really caked in mud compared to some of the other ones I've seen, that's my workshop floor after being mopped and vacuumed once already. Got to do that a few more times to clean it up. That'll give you an idea of some of the schmutz that's every time you touch anything, automatically falls right in your face. So hats off to anyone that's a diesel mechanic or a 4x4 mechanic or people that work on these all the time. Yeah, no, you can keep that. Definitely not for me. I was trying really hard not to let things fall in my eyes. Like I'd be right over here and leaning all the way over there trying to, you know, do a bolt. And then somehow I'm fiddling around over this way, things fall in my face. And not just in my face, right in my eyeball. And it's a mixture of oil, grease, diesel, and dust in a little ball right in the eyeball. So no thanks. I'll stick to cars. I'll stick to things that are actually fast. Although it was fun and challenging, and now that it's finished, very satisfying. But otherwise, yeah, nah, no more. Keep your turbo diesels and keep your Land Cruisers, etc., etc. I like to stay on the bitumen. Thanks very much. I will do an update on the intake and how I run that. That'll also be on the channel. So if you're interested in that, make sure you subscribe. Check out the community page. I don't know if I'm going to put a photo. I'll do a very short video on it when those parts arrive. Real simple. But that'll do it for now. Thanks for watching. Make sure you spool up, like, share, and subscribe. We'll see you in the next video. Cheers.